His Majesty the King promised that the crown princes would be his. He owes her his life, Daphne. She's worked hard for so many years for this, staying in his shadow. It must have been hard. But there's no need for that now. As soon as he's the prince, she can live the life she's dreamed of. Thank you, Daphne. She's her good luck charm. Thanks to her, they can live happily ever after. Tomorrow the story will have a happy ending. She read this novel in a previous life, so she knows. The eldest prince, Alan, is the main character in the story. He will inherit the throne. After that, he has a long road of development ahead of him. Then he proposes marriage to the main character, Flora. He proposes to live happily ever after. She'll nod and say in a voice shaking with happiness, "She's waited so long for this." And that's the happy ending. That way she will avoid a horrible death, as she had in the original story. And she herself can live happily ever after. A freedom she had not seen in her previous life. She would be hers even if she existed only in a novel. So she reasoned. But for what? What was all this for her? Tell me. At least what was it for? Daphne stood outside the burned-out mansion and asked it all. Just a couple hours ago. They were so kind and tactful to her. She hadn't done anything to them. Then who had set it all up? Daphne couldn't figure out. The palace guard will come and the rioters will be arrested. "Anyone who sided with the princess is guilty of death," shouted one of the guards. All the servants asked the princess what we should do. Everyone was crying, not understanding what was about to happen to them. But they were all killed, leaving only one princess sitting tied up in the middle of the courtyard. Her head started to feel really bad. She started to lose consciousness. Just one day until happy endings. But it's all turned upside down. She's made a huge effort to have the happiness she's had in this life. And here you are, sitting on the ground with the whole estate burning around her. She heard her name, Daphne. Suddenly she saw her brother coming toward her. Her brother asked where she had gotten so frazzled and what had happened. "Brother," she said. Her rest and the guards and riotous servants burst in. "What's going on anyway?" asked Daphne. At that moment her brother was standing there smiling. She asked why he was smiling. "Sister, your victory must be his, and winners are not judged," her brother said. He already had his sword in his hand. Her brother said she did her job perfectly, pulling out his sword and swinging it at her. She would never betray him. She wished him and Flora nothing but happiness. Bratz's full strength kicked her off her foot, and Flora fell. When he becomes crown prince, he doesn't need her, nor does he need Kale or Claire alive. There's no room in his kingdom for any other claimant to the throne. Don't be afraid, you won't see death, Claire. The only one to blame here is Daphne. It's her. It's her naivete. "But she never claimed the throne," Daphne said. "This is some kind of misunderstanding, brother. Stop. Please listen to her. Flora, if Flora finds out about this, it will break her heart," Daphne shouted. "What did you say, brother?" And to him, Flora told him to kill you. Flora's in complete agreement with him on this one. What was her mistake? She sincerely wished these two to be happy, and tried her best for that. At that moment, her brother raised his sword into the air to strike. She was helping them so they could be happy, and she herself could be free and happy. Daphne squeezed her eyes shut hard and tight so she wouldn't see herself die. This is the second time she's died like this. Doesn't want a repeat of what happened in her first life. She had loved ones then, and she thought they loved her, but they all betrayed her. She didn't understand why it was repeating itself here too. Her own loved ones had also betrayed her. Lying on the ground, Flora thought that Alan, of all people, would never betray her. But that's exactly what he did. Bright white light, or yellow, the room was filled with this color, beautiful sunlight. Our heroine, Flora, woke up with tears in her eyes. Sitting down on the bed, she took a breath and began to wonder what had happened. The manor didn't seem to be on fire. She sits on the bed, the room around her. She is in her chambers. But Alan had just killed her girl, immediately started groping herself. But there was no pain, no blood, everything was fine. Why are her hands so small? When she felt herself, she noticed. The girl got out of bed on the floor and realized that some weakness in her body. But the manor didn't seem to be on fire. Where did the weakness come from? She walked over to the mirror to look at herself, noticing that she had dark circles under her eyes. And I saw that she was only 13 years old. She's small. How did she survive? I mean, she was just dead. When Daphne was that age, the plot hadn't even started yet, our protagonist recalls. She is given a secondary role in this novel as a moral support, which eventually leads her to a sad end. To be precise, The plot requires her role to hold back the development of the protagonist, Alan, and she has to die. The only way to survive is to hold on to one of the main characters. But she bet on the wrong people and was betrayed again. Why is she back so early this time? But it's not that important. It's that she's alive now. It's also important that Alan tricked her once again, and everyone she trusted betrayed her, and she trusted them. Their smiles seemed genuine, hopeful. All the people from the past life, Alan, Flora, how could they leave her? They're not human. Alan, she's gonna make him feel what she felt. To avenge him, she will need the help of many people. Those who hate the king and all his kind. Among the common people to find help, she needs someone from a noble family. Perhaps a relative of the royal family. Who can help her with this? Duke Cabalith is no good. He's Flora's grandfather. The other Prince Sklar, he's a scoundrel too. Or the Countess born with a golden spoon in her mouth, El Miller. Maybe just go to them and say hello because they won't listen to a commoner. We'll have to wait for El Miller to be a little more humble. Knowing all this won't do her any good. Maybe someone else will. Oh yes, there is someone suitable, and he's not royalty. This man, according to the story, was an enemy to her and Alan. A devil and a rebel against royalty. He hates the royal family as much as she does now. Archduke Klein Bertrand, who took his own mother's life to take her place. Bedeviled the cold northern lands teeming with demons. He's only 15 years old, and already there are so many scary rumors about him. The only thing that wasn't true was that he drank blood instead of water. She wished he wouldn't just betray her and help her a little. Together, they could get rid of Alan. She will do anything to make them suffer. Now she must think of how she can get the Archduke's attention. I was thinking, who's going to help her? A woman entered the room, medicine in her hands. You said you were feverish and not even out of bed. You're lying again, my lady, the woman said. And she knew she was right. Tossing the medicine under her feet, the woman said, She's already had a long drive to get it, so say, thank you. Daphne bent down to pick up the medicine and began to recall something from her past life. This maid's name is Marielle Liebert. The position of her maid was for many. As it was, when she was looking for a maid, the line of maids who refused, Marielle barely accepted. When Daphne told her that she was glad to meet her, her response was, You should be glad to be alive, my lady. Not every simpleton like you gets a title all of a sudden. Commoners who have become nobles are repugnant to servants. But in public, Marielle behaved impeccably, like a caring and kind maid. Well, when there was some trouble, like the pool situation, the maid took the time to help her, which is saying something that my lady is so eager to join the royal family. Manor maid constantly scolded her. You must obey me, she shouted. Otherwise no one will see you as an aristocrat. I see. The story doesn't say so, but she learned it the hard way. Now back to the present. The maid asks what she's doing here at Daphne's. When Daphne was seriously ill, she threw cheap medicine and bread at her and scolded her to obey her. Daphne remembered everything now, opening the medicine jar and taking one. Well, it just so happened that the jar had accidentally dropped to the floor. The medicine, Daphne said. Lift her up, please. Good, or she's got a headache. She lay down, Daphne said. At the servant girl, Marielle got angry, grabbed Daphne by the shoulder and turned her around, saying, How are you behaving? What do you think you're doing? Daphne began to reason. I wonder what she'll say this time. The maid screamed louder and louder. She asked her, Answer me, Daphne said to Marielle. Well, the maid says indignantly again, You are forgetting yourself, my lady. You allow yourself the rudeness of calling her by her first name. She is Mrs. Liberta to her. Why not, if you're dressed as a maid? Maybe you are her maid, said Daphne. It's been a long time since you've had a beating, my lady. Well, she'll beat you up and make you wake up. Marielle reaches for the whip and says, Be patient and learn. The king and queen will never recognize you. Never. But Daphne said to Marielle, She thinks you should be punished. After all, you've been stealing her wages for so many years. You could buy yourself a nice house. It really is a nice house. Well, how are you satisfied with the fruits of your stealing from the royal family? Asked Daphne. Marielle was immediately startled and began to ask how you would know that. Well, Daphne, not confused, said she knew a lot of things and could tell the emperor. So you'd better be friends with her. You're not stupid. Use your brains. If she tells the emperor that you've been stealing from his treasury, which one of us will he be angry with? Think about it. And won't you lose your head after that? If she exposes you, she will only be praised. Because she'll immediately point out where the emperor's gold went. About recognizing the king and queen? Don't worry, she's not interested. But if she sacrifices her, Marielle, our relationship will be a little better. Thank you so much. Marielle fell to the floor to her knees, clutched her head and began to ooze, wondering what she should do now. She threw herself into her lap and began to say, "Your Highness, Princess." She's begging me not to tell them. Just take pity on her. Daphne thought she could still use the maid, and she'd get even with her later. She'd have to find out what Alan was up to first, and then she could move on. "All right," Daphne said. "What can you do? She's kind. She'll keep you alive." Marielle immediately burst into tears. "Really, thank you so much," she said. "Yes, but only in return you will listen to her in everything. Understand, Marielle?" Marielle lowered her head and said, "Yes, Your Highness." She would do as Daphne told her. "Okay, let's get started then. She's very hungry. Go get her something. She's almost fainting from hunger." Marielle said she'll be right with you, Your Highness, and food will be brought to you. Just a couple minutes later, Marielle brought a tray with soup, a roll, and tea. Daphne was very surprised. "This is the first time anything decent has been brought," she said. Daphne gobbled, and then remembered that Count Komen was coming from his audience tomorrow. "You need to get me there in the middle of the meeting." Marielle became indignant. "Why, how do you know he's coming, Your Highness?" He was the only one who protested against the tax bill at a cabinet meeting. His Majesty didn't like it, so he intends to kill the Earl. "I will change his mind," Daphne said. That was the story. She needs to save the Count. He is the key to her plan. "How do you do?" replied the maid Marielle. "Count Komen will come to speak to the Emperor about the bill. Wait for the Count in the garden on the way to the audience chamber." "Take him to her," Daphne said. "It's really coming." How did she know? Only the royalty and high society know about this meeting, thought the maid. Count Komen, a man of honor. He had been known since the previous king's reign for not being shy about telling the truth. Marielle turned to him saying her mistress requests an urgent visit, Your Ladyship. "Madam, it's probably someone from the royal family," the Count thought. He said, "Lead on," and followed the maid. While Daphne waited for the Count and Marielle, she pondered. She already had a loyal maid. She could really use the favor of someone as important as Count Komen. When Marielle led the Count to Daphne, Daphne greeted him, "Your Lordship," and bowed. The Count said, "That it is an honor to meet you, Your Highness Princess Daphne." "Did you recognize?" she replied. "He knows there are only 2 children your age in the royal family, Your Highness, you and Prince Alan, and really?" replied Daphne. "Daphne will need to speak to His Majesty. Only it's not appropriate for a princess to look like she does." "Count, you are going to see the king, aren't you?" said Daphne. "That is true, but—" "So how do you know, Your Highness?" he asked. "She knows you've been voting against the tax bill for years, and she's asking you to change your position this time, because you can't make a difference on your own." But the Count said he would never go for such a thing. Earl, though at first irascible, then thought that, indeed, until at least one member of the council accepted the bill, it would not be passed. "Still, Princess, who told you?" "Ah, Count, I cannot reveal that secret. If the only canary that sings in the forest is killed by a hunter, the forest will fall into silence." "Do you know what she means?" "Because of taxes." "Are you saying that the king intends to kill him and his entire family?" "That is right, Your Lordship. You are going against the king's will. Therefore know that His Majesty has already prepared arrows for the canary." "It's just a nightmare," said the Count. He stopped and thought about it. He had a tear in his eye. He really didn't expect this. Daphne noticed that the Earl was distraught, due to the fact that he realized that there was no longer a shred of honor at court, as there had been under the former king, and he had been betrayed. And sadly, she added, "There's something else. The king intends to betroth your daughter to Archduke Bertrand. Her honor will be violated and she will be killed. This is the king's will." The Count became quite upset. He shouted, "No, no, he will not give his daughter to a teaching death!" Daphne said indignantly, "That's right, and don't give it back. If you do everything she says, it won't happen. She asks you very much this time to change your position on the tax bill so that it will be passed," she said, turned and walked away. "But Your Highness, if taxes are raised, the people will suffer. You yourself are of the people," the Earl shouted to Daphne. "Count, you have only 2 choices," she said. 1. You will submit to the will of the king. 2. Keep resisting and you will die. "There are no thirds, Your Ladyship. I hope you make the right choice," Daphne said. "You're not the only one who's going to die. She wouldn't want that. Think about it. Your Highness, may he ask you from what you give such odds to him? Daphne said we all have goals. If you defy the king, you will thwart his plans. And when he raises the question of whom to marry Archduke Bertrand, she asks you to recommend her, Daphne. Our sweet princess, you are about to embark on a very dangerous path. Do you realize that? Said the Count. Don't worry, she will tell her brothers. It's just that she wants to live freely. She has the same fate here as in the Archduke's household. She will either starve to death here or be sold into slavery by a foreigner when she grows up. For her, Count, you needn't worry. Your daughter won't have to fight for the inheritance. But if she marries, she won't have to. The Count thanked Daphne for this information. Surely he would recommend her when the time came. Only let him think, of course, as you please, said Daphne. Let me go already. Goodbye, princess, said the Count. As Daphne walked to her resting place, she wondered. What do you mean the Count would think? He was probably just shocked by all this information. Either way, he would soon realize that she was right, and he would be grateful to her, and that would make him a loyal ally. A month passed. The Count invited Princess Daphne for a talk. When Daphne met the Count, she asked if you said you had something to tell her. When Daphne saw the Count, she asked, You're very thin, Count. Something's wrong. You were right, Princess. He said when he raised the question of the Archduke's marriage, the king wanted to appoint his daughter. And then he recommended you. You probably already know that. Yes, your ladyship. The brothers have already told me she's going to Bertrand. Really, they must be very worried about you, said the Earl. Not at all, Count. They took it with annoyance. Frankly, he feels guilty about sending you to the beast's den instead of his daughter. He's very concerned about Daphne. He put in this chest some herbs and weapons for self-defense. Otherwise, surely with your crew packed pleasure and a supply of the capital's tea, isn't it? Asked the Count. He handed over this chest, the girl replied. Thank you. Actually, it's the only show of care she's experienced in this life, said the princess to the Count. It can't be, he said. Doesn't anyone help you pack, your highness? No, they're not interested in me, Daphne said. But don't worry, they've always been like this. She's used to it. Princess Count leaned down and whispered, Tell me honestly, no one is looking after you at all. How do the princes treat you? Do the servants look after you? Daphne thought for a moment. Well, they really didn't care at all. She did everything on her own. The Count said about the grief, and he thought the princes. And you care because they talk about it means they're lying. He thought she lived a carefree life, as befitted a princess. Are they straight up all lying from the lower class? But the royal family adopted you, and your brothers turn out to treat you that way, Daphne said. But that's why she told you she'd rather live with the Archduke's family. If no one in this palace cares for you, he would be honored to be your patron. He will see to your safety until you return home, said the Earl with a bow. He asks you to take care of yourself, and send him a letter at once if you need anything. Daphne thanked the Count for such a gift and consideration. Coleman has always been a kind man, both in story and in practice. The Earl went, and David insisted and watched after him. She would never forget his kindness. He was the only person who at this point appealed to her, and the way he protected his family. Daphne, please come here. He wants to see her before she leaves. Daphne saw her brother and shouted, Brother! And ran to him. She thought he was busy, but he came after all. Not at all, he said. Really worried about her, Daphne said. She's going to be fine. He hadn't expected her to have to make a commitment this early. He wished this was all just a dream. It must have been so hard on her. Take care, sister. Finally live up to the family's expectation, the brother said. Dash is nervous about something. Her heart is pounding, her hands are shaking. She needs to calm down. The worst was far ahead, but not now for sure. She pulled herself together and said, Thank you for coming to see her off. She thought no one loved her, but he came. Can he not love her? Said the brother. He was busy with the inheritance, but he saw that she was distressed. Well, yes, of course he never came to see her himself, Daphne thought. Him, the king, they all just watched her die alone. What a fool she was not to realize that. I'm sorry. He had to protect. Her brother hugged his sister, but she'd have to let her go. Into someone else's house again, he said, sorry. Yeah, well, she didn't really believe him. Nothing to pretend to care. No matter how much she was in tears and begging him not to even look in her direction, he had at least a little power in this house. He would never let that monster in the house, my brother said. and a tear rolled down his cheek. She is sent to certain death, and meanwhile Alan is so busy playing to the public. How can they all believe this play? Vassals and No follows him around. Thank you, brother, she said. I didn't know he cared about her. And then she got upset. She thought he'd forgotten about her altogether. Not him, not Claire. You didn't come to see her once. Crying, Daphne said that no one loved her. Everyone forgot about her. Even when she came down with a fever, no one visited her. She was so lonely. Alan said, Daphne said. Daphne, stand up. He's got things to do, so he's gonna go. Look at this, he said. I've prepared gifts for her, a whole trunk, and that trunk is already packed in your carriage. Oh, thanks, brother, Daphne said. All right, next time please take the time and have a good talk with her, Daphne told brother Alan. Looking at him, she thought she'd kill him next time. Alan said, well, Daphne, he promises. Thank you, brother, Daphne said. When she comes back, she'll take everything he has from him, Daphne thought. Daphne turned around and followed into the carriage. Marielle, Daphne's maid, also goes to the Archduke's land. Marielle, Daphne's maid, also goes to the Archduke's land. Will die with his mistress, said the maids in consequence. Your Highness, no further carriage has been provided, so she will ride with her, Marielle said with a bow. Daphne thought she might as well ask for another carriage, but she wouldn't ask for her sake. Marielle said, heap touch, and off they went. Daphne noticed that Marielle's hands were bruised in some way, as if someone had hit her. She decided to ask Marielle, who hit you? Ah, yes, just scratched while working. No big deal, Your Highness, Marielle said. Scratched, you say? Doesn't look like it, Your Highness, just scratched. Daphne thought that in a past life, maybe she had hurt the other maids with her temper. She would deal with her gradually. What she did would turn the plot around a bit, but not now. She even got a casket from the Count. But if things went wrong, Marielle sat back and resented herself. Why was she interested in the lives of ordinary people? A couple days ago, she couldn't even speak properly. How could she change so much overnight? The carriages all stopped. Everyone got out of the carriages and breathed the air. Excuse me, sir, Marielle the maid turned. The two girls standing behind her were discussing her. Rachel, look at that feisty girl. She's a servant, isn't she? How did she get such rich clothes then? This is outrageous. She's going to the Archduke without our permission. Well, don't worry. The knights will protect us, and no one will protect these two commoners. The girls talked among themselves. Understood, sir, Marielle said and went to the carriage. Coming to Daphne, Marielle said, Your Highness, as you said, the Parman Pass is coming up. She bought something for you in the nearest village. Marielle, thank you, Daphne replied. She knows the plot, so she needed to make sure of something. Daphne said to Marielle, Open the door. Marielle asked, Where are you going, princess? She wanted to talk to that knight. Yes, Your Highness. Marielle opened the door for Daphne to come out. Sir, she called out to the young man. What's the matter when you call? The older ones have to come up themselves, the man said. Daphne said, Her maid told her that Parman Pass is coming up, right? So what? The man replied. It's just that she gets very seasick on this road, sir. What other way? Don't be silly. I know this path better than you, the man replied. All this time, Marielle could hear Daphne and the man talking. She wondered if Daphne thought she could just take and change the route as she pleased. The man thought too, he's not going to take orders from some smarmy commoner. He does not intend to. Daphne looked at him and realized that she knew it. Nothing had changed. Dasha, said Sir. You know, don't you, that high office usually comes with high responsibility. Yeah, talk some more. He's got someone to teach, the man said. There's a surprising lack of patience here, Maria said. It's just outrageous. But Daphne said leave it alone. He kind of agrees that he'll take responsibility if there's an accident, so we'll see. When the man had gone, Daphne called to his maid, saying, Come here, you heard everything, didn't you? She didn't hear anything. She just walked up, the girl said. You're lying. You were with the man the whole time, and you heard everything. What you're talking about, don't try to bring me into it at all. What insolence, said the girl and left. Daphne thought they were all as arrogant as ever she would remind them of that. The story goes that when the Comnapad hit here, she came to rescue Count Coman's daughter. Small pebbles on the roof of the carriage were a sign that it was about to happen. Marielle noticed this, said the rocks were falling, and looked up. Daphne screamed, Stop the horses! A man who had a lot of indignation asked, What's their drive on? Ignore it. But the guy next to him says there's a princess saying something. The man said he wouldn't let a commoner give commands here. I see, he told his partner. They did get off their horses and followed Daphne's carriage. The partner guy said, "Captain, I understand you, but you can't take orders from royalty." But the man said, "Mind your own business." Walking up to Daphne's carriage, the man opened the door with a lunatic and said, "I told you to mind your own business." Marielle screamed, "What are you doing to yourself? You're insulting the princess with your behavior." The man said, "You'd better keep your mouth shut. No one's asking you here." Understood. The rest of the guards started to resent each other too. What's going on in there is not clear. They're supposed to protect the princess's life, aren't they? But the others said it was better not to interfere, would be a headache. Marielle came out of the carriage to the guards and told the man that even if the emperor is not around, you must still obey him. The man shouted, "He's gonna show the woman who taught him." "Stop," shouted from Daphne. "Your knightly honor is making her more and more doubtful, sir. If you don't want to keep her safe, put First Division in charge of it, as you know," she said. Daphne got out of the carriage and said to Marielle, "Get her luggage out of the carriage." "Yes," the princess said to Marielle, "and tell everyone to get out." Marielle said, tell everybody to get out." The man said, "Oh, I got it. Those women who were gossiping." And Daphne and Marielle got out of the carriage and began to meet again. One of them said what she was thinking, and the other one, I don't know, made up something about a rockfall. Probably just didn't want to go to Bertrand's place. And then you give up, scream and run. The rocks are flying down the mountain and straight at the carriages. All miraculously survived. Ah, how is it possible that if the princess hadn't told everyone to get out, no one would be here right now? They'd all be swamped. "The princess's crew is broken, but the others are unharmed," the knights said. Well, now Daphne thought it was time to punish them. "You write a statement to the emperor. You are a witness to the commander's actions," she said to the maid of the man in charge. The girl was indignant. "Why are you blaming all this on her? What kind of witness is she to you?" "She has orders to escort her to the Duke, not to write any statements." Daphne figured that, as always, no one was on her side. No matter what happens to her, no one will stand up for her except Marielle. It's exactly the same as in the palace. She has to make an argument. "Why are you adults all acting like this? She's really a commoner by blood, but she was adopted by the imperial family. If she reports what happened to the emperor, you will all be guilty of death. Some of you will be lucky enough to be separated by prison for insulting the imperial family," Daphne said. "So you have no choice, please write." The girl was indignant, but she had no paper or ink. "Please wait, she'll go get them." Then a voice came. "Don't bother." Everyone turned around and saw what Marielle had said. She had paper and ink, and the man's servant girl was not pleased. She brought everything, and she said, "Write." I opened the drawer, and there was paper and ink and pen. The commander of the knights misused his duties, insulted the princess, and ignored her warnings. As a result, the princess was in danger, and your imperial majesty's order to deliver the princess was jeopardized. "What, you want to kill her to save your own skins?" thought Daphne, looking at the maid and the man who was pulling all those wagons. When she had finished writing, the maid said she would send this letter now. But Daphne snatched it out of her hands and said, "Let's see. We have to check what you wrote there first. Your Imperial Majesty, we had made it to the pass just fine, barmaid, when suddenly there was a rockfall. The princess and her carriage were unhurt, and she is the maid reporting to you." "How dare she show such contempt for the royal family?" shouted one of the guards who should be responsible for the safety of the princess. "Seize them," he said. "What, are you standing there? Do you also want to go to jail for insulting the royal family?" She almost died because of all of you, and you can be charged with attempting her life," Daphne said. The knights grabbed the man who was in charge of everyone. He shouts, "Scoundrels, let go!" The man's maid is also captured. She shouts to him, "Your Highness, she was wrong. Forgive her." They handcuffed her. "But we've dealt with the violent ones, so no one will question her authority now," Daphne said. "Knights, she commands you to escort these two to stand trial." "Yes, Your Highness," the knights replied. "Well, Daphne needs a carriage now." "Marielle, get her luggage into this carriage," said Daphne. "Wait a minute, Princess. This is our crew," the women who had been discussing the whole way shouted in embarrassment. "They have to ride on something too, not on foot, right?" Daphne turned to them and said with a smile, "Take care of yourselves. There's a village nearby. Perhaps you can ask for a wagon of some kind. You can take your time." Marielle asked Daphne, "How did you guess, Princess?" She replies, "She just knows everything." "Everyone into the carriage," she smiled and said, "We'll finally get to ride with the wind." When everyone arrived, they announced that your lordship, the princess, had arrived. One of the knights said he didn't know how long she'd be here before she shrieked from the cold. I don't know if she's right for you, the man said to the young man. But the man said, you'd better keep quiet, your lordship. If she finds out what they're going to do. The guy turned around and told him a second time to be quiet. The man replied, your lordship, pardon my rudeness. The guy said he hadn't made an opening. He didn't think she'd be here long either. When the carriage pulled up, and the wagon pulled up, the guards swept up. What a prank. They didn't expect her to put the maids in the kibitka. When the princess got out of the carriage, everyone noticed her pink hair. They thought the adopted princess was a blonde, but this girl is completely different from how she was described. Adorable, hair like a cherry color, soft pink. The knights remarked that her hair was the color of spring. My lord, they said, you're looking at the wrong place. Look at the way she's dressed. Maybe that's how they dress in the capital, in a cloak that doesn't fit, one of the knights said. Stepping out of the carriage, Daphne proceeded to Prince Mariel's room. She wondered why no one had bothered to give the princess winter clothes. It's an early fall raincoat, you slacker types. No respect. Come along, princess, Mariel said. Why is she so worried? Daphne thought. Mariel continued to resent being given a cold cloak that didn't fit her. And they're standing there, like a statue, instead of helping her. Do they want the princess to trip over that cloak? The prince went forward to the princess, but the guard said, my lord, it was not proper to do so. He came over and said his name is Cale Bertrand. From now on he will take care of you. Even Mariel noticed that my lord was allowing himself a lot. Her name is Daphne Blake, my lord, Daphne said. It's a pleasure to meet you, your lordship. Daphne took his hands. But Cale Bertrand wrenched his hand away and strode forward. My lord, wait, she said. Restrooms have been prepared for you, your highness. You must rest, one of the knights said. The butler will show you out. Daphne realized that she had been hasty and shouldn't have taken his hands right away. Mariel said, Princess, let's go quickly. The people are friendly. Although our nations have fought in the past, they were eventually able to come to peace. It had been so long since she'd been to this citadel, Daphne reflected, and before it was scary to go. But this time she feels much more comfortable here than in the royal palace. The butler greeted the princess, saying, Welcome, your highness. Leave your things here and follow him. He'll show you her room this way, please. He butler asks you to forgive him, lordship, for his rudeness. He's been fighting monsters a lot lately. Daphne said, That's all right. His lordship lives in a land where there are very many monsters, and it befits him to be careful. So he's going on a monster hunt right now. When would he be back? The butler replied that he and his squad were already scouting the nearest town. So he'll be back by morning. Daphne thought, if she asked to see Cale, she probably wouldn't be allowed to. It's everywhere at once. She has to bypass the maids to get to the reading room. As they approached the room, the butler said, He has heated the fireplace for you, and your luggage will be brought here. Daphne remarked that it was 100 times better than her room in the palace. The butler asked, If you need anything, call me, your highness. The next morning, Mariel, yes, princess, hand her a comb, to her, please. Mariel, those maids who were sent with me, they are the ones who beat you. Yes, they did, your highness. And why do you ask? She thinks she can use them, Mariel interjected. If you bribe them with good relations and gifts, they pitch right in. It was the two girls who had been discussing Mariel all the way too. She'll need them, Daphne said. We need them to mislead the emperor. That's what you need to do. Milord's room, the butler helping him undress. You had a good battle today, he said. We took a few alive on the way back. They will be taken to the castle soon, Klein said. Got it. He's worried that the curse might come alive because of the smell of blood. A bath and a light supper for you. Don't forget to take your medicine, milord, the butler said. Yeah, got it. He's done. Stop prying, Klein said. Thirsty, he's thirsty again, Klein said. But if he drinks blood, the curse will gain more power. But the medicine helps quench his thirst. Klein remembered how everyone insulted him, saying, Look at him, a blood-sucking ghoul. He ate his own mother and is happy. He probably ate his father, too, and then he'll eat them all. Sighing, Klein said, I wish he really was a monster. Klein went to the reading room to get a little distraction. Walking in there, he saw Daphne, who said, Good night, my lord. Why are you here, princess? Asked Klein. How did she know when he was coming, he thought. She really wanted to catch you two alone. She must have something to say to him, Mariel said. And what is that? asked Klein, said a surprised voice. She will help him dispel the curse and become emperor, to bring back the glory of Bertrand and even spring to your region. It's all in her head, said Daphne. How does he know she's telling the truth? Said Klein. If she does this, he'll believe her. She took his hand and said, the power to suppress the curse. Klein realized he still wanted blood. But Daphne kept saying she would make him emperor. She said to please be healthy and grow big. And when you grow up, please kill the whole royal family. Klein threw up his hand and said it was treason. This time he would pretend he hadn't heard anything, turned around and wanted to leave. But Daphne tells him on the way out, treason. You say so, but you're already preparing yourself for a war for the throne. How does she know? Asked Klein, turning around and looking at her. If the emperor knew, he would realize you were a rebel. But luckily neither he nor his cronies know anything about it. Just her, so he has nothing to fear. She hates the prince and the emperor as much as he does, and wishes them the worst fate in death, Daphne said. And if he doesn't agree, asked Klein, he'll have one more enemy. Klein pulled out his dagger and said, careful, with the words princess. He might as well kill her. Pressing the dagger to his neck, Klein said, but without her help, he'll have to move on with this curse. How does it feel to you anyway? She knows the blood doesn't quench his constant thirst, but makes it worse. Klein wondered how she could know all this. An accomplished commoner, and yet she knows the deepest secrets of the court. He presented the sword to her throat, but she didn't even move. She's not playing around. She must have a lot of valuable information about the royal family at her disposal, Klein thought. He said he had to think about it, removing the dagger from Daphne's neck. This is a completely unconventional situation, and he needs to calculate the options at will, Your Highness, Daphne said. I shall see you tomorrow at breakfast, the Archduke bowed. Little brat, who does she think she is? Resented Adia, the maid who had come with Daphne and Marielle. How could she do that to Natalie and her fiancé? Rachel, tell me, do you have any idea how she could have known about the rockfall? Rachel replied that she didn't know. She's wondering that too. Where from? There was a knock on the door, and the girls asked, Who's there? This is Marielle. May I come in to see you? You're a maid after all. Go work until you're done for the day. And anyway, where's your maid uniform? Said Adia. Stop that right now, Marielle said. You and I have been friends since childhood, or have you already forgotten? Well, yes, Rachel, you heard that. Marielle spoke up for herself. It wasn't us being friends, it was you chasing us. Yes, it is, Marielle said, and she was immediately reminded of a passage from her childhood. Marielle, if she took someone else's, you'll have to pay. But she didn't take anything. You saw something wrong. But you didn't see her take it. Marielle, shame on her. Pay up and then you won't get hurt. She must have stolen the brooch because she's a beggar. Marielle yelled that she didn't steal anything and you're her friends. How could you think that about her? She's a bad girl. And she hasn't changed, say already. Why has she come? Asked the maids to Marielle. Marielle fell to her knees and began to beg them. Rachel, Adia, please take her back to the capital with you. They've already completed their task. She doesn't want to die here with her mistress for her misdeeds. Dream on, Adia said. How long can they babysit her already, eternal debtor? You can't put a thank you in your pocket. Marielle screamed that she would do anything they asked of her. Tears flowed. All right, Adia said. You will obey only us strictly. She's not very bright, but she'll be useful to us. We'll report to them what the queen is doing. Marielle said she understood. Speaking of rockfall, Adia remembered, and decided to ask, how did the princess know? Nothing special about it, Adia. She just guessed. She was afraid she couldn't get her revenge, so she made a fuss. Adia said she knew it. She was just pretending to know something. It was a publicity game. She thinks she can avoid them. Together they'll show her. And only Marielle stood and realized that it had been a success. Your Highness, she did an excellent job of what Daphne asked. How cozy it was, Daphne, in the new room, in the new bed. She couldn't lie down. She never slept so sweetly in her life as she did tonight. She wanted to sleep some more, but Adia came into the room and said, Your Highness can't sleep this late. It's time to get up. And it's almost lunchtime. Please get up. Your Highness, if you are to be lazy, what example will you set for your subjects? Said Adia. She also saw yesterday how you did not speak courteously to the Archduke. We need to work on you. A bowl of water and ice cubes stood. Wash your face, said Adia. But it's ice, said Daphne. How am I supposed to wash my face with ice water, Adia? All the water is ice cold this morning. Can't be helped. I'm sorry. Generously. Did you know that washing your face with ice water, on the contrary, makes your skin more beautiful? Fedya, I took a bowl of water, she said. That will help her now. You still have a lot to learn. Edia washed Daphne with this cold water that she cried out that she was cold. Kale Bertrand, who was passing by, heard the conversation between Edia and Daphne and intervened. What do you think you're doing? Shouted Daphne. She's helping you wash your face. I should have dunked your face in that water, apparently, Edia said. What did you say? The door swung open and Klein walked in, saying, You have all the maids in the capital trained to be rude. Archduke, he asks why you are being rude to your mistress. Not at all, Edia said, bowing. You see, your ladyship, the princess has not yet learned how to behave. She will teach her behind closed doors, Edia said. Actually, there should be another maid here, said Edia. Well, bring her here now, said the Archduke. The two guards went after the second maid. Just a minute later, they returned with her. What are you doing? Shouted the second maid. Let go! A second maid was brought in, saying, Here she is. Edia says she made me do it. Edie, what is she talking about? She said she didn't want to do it and she made her come here too. The girls started shifting their blame with each other. Who was asking who? It is so. The Emperor shows him his respect for sending him pigs in the guise of maids, said the Archduke. Execute them, said Klein. Spare her, the maids ask you. They are just ignorant, don't judge them harshly, Daphne said. She asks not to kill them, since that's the way it is. They need to be changed maids. They're no good anyway. You will be maids in the Citadel for a month, and you will make up for lost time, said the Archduke. My lord, why such unkindness, said Edia. They are noble women. Lowering her head, Edia said she understood. The Archduke said, Get out of his sight. Your lordship, why have you come? Asked Daphne. To show you the dining room, he said. I'm sorry, but she needs to get ready. She'll be down shortly, my lord. Marielle came into the room. Your Highness, she said, here are your clothes, and she wiped the floor. Yes, thank you, Marielle, said Daphne. When Daphne was ready, washed and dressed, she went down to the dining room, where she was already met by the Archduke. Next they went to the dining room alone, Marielle staying in the hallway. The Archduke wouldn't let her in. He said, What shall we leave the maids at the door, your Highness? Why do you need those maids after all that's happened? She asked. Marielle is a good maid, Daphne replied. One would think you'd trust her, Klein said. No, but still, Daphne replied. It's just that she knows Marielle can't betray her. She had the opportunity, but she stopped her. He said he would help her, of course. But he is tormented by a question. Answer it, your Highness. Why do you hate the royal family? She was bailed out and adopted from an orphanage. All the orphans wanted to eat enough and what they wanted and wear pretty dresses. But sometime later she learned that the orphanage had burned down. They say it was done by robbers to steal charity offerings, everyone knew. That it was the Emperor's doing. He wanted to destroy the evidence. Evidence? Interposed the Archduke. Charitable contributions? She doesn't know what else they're up to. When they brought her back to the palace, she was still no one. That's how it was, Daphne said. This is a princess for the Emperor, just a pawn. We will have to secretly check her words, thought the Archduke. Only then will he be able to break this fate that the royal family has imposed on them. And support is not a bad thing. The Archduke stood up, bowed, and said that he would accept her support, your Highness. We'll be glad to help him, your ladyship, Daphne replied. Let's eat and tell each other some more, suggested the Archduke. Daphne suggested, Let's talk about the economy of your region. She suggests they send out expeditions to explore the fields. What fields? Kale asked. Many things can be of interest, but most of all ore. Of course, you'll have to make a substantial investment before you get a return on the deposit. But please don't worry about that. We'll take care of the mines later. She would like to start looking for investors now, but the ore is too valuable to share. Besides, mining this ore is a very long process. Do you know what it is about? Most likely I do, said the Archduke. It is a mountain village called Morton, where many blacksmiths live. He's been there before a long time ago, Kale reflected with his parents. Then he jumped up and said, Enough talk, right now he's going there. He will return tomorrow night. You had better stay here, princess, for your safety, said the Archduke. Very well, your lordship, replied Daphne. In Daphne's room. Marielle, where's the bracelet she asked me to buy? Ah, yes, your Highness, Marielle said. Here it is. And holding out the box, she had packed it just in case. The wrapping is certainly unnecessary, Daphne said. Marielle looked at her and thought that this girl was up to something again. I wonder what this time. Daphne took that bracelet, walked to the balcony and threw it away. What is she doing? Marielle thought. Then Daphne came into the room, fell on the floor and started crying. Marielle ran up to her and asked, "Your Highness, what happened?" Daphne showed Marielle quietly with a finger that this was all on purpose so she wouldn't mess anything up. "Her bracelet!" Daphne exclaimed. 2 guards entered the room. "Your Highness, who has wronged you?" they asked. "Princess, we'll help you. Just tell us what's wrong." She dropped her favorite bracelet when she went out on the balcony. This bracelet had been given to her by her mom when she was a baby. "Oh, Mommy, I'm sorry." Daphne began to cry. One guard asks what, and the other whispers to him, "The princess is adopted in that case. This bracelet must have been given to her by her real mother, sending her to an orphanage because she couldn't feed her. The princess was waiting for her mother to return, but she was taken away by the emperor. So this bracelet is her only solace in the cruel environment of the imperial court. She loved this bracelet so much she even named it Jane." One of the guards got upset. The other asked, "What's wrong with you?" "Please don't cry, princess. We will surely find him," the guards said. Daphne asked if she could go with them. The guards hesitated and then began to think. Well, they said she couldn't. Then she would wait. She began to remember that it was exactly like that time, and said that she would wait for her mother. One guard shoved the other and said, "Hey, you're crazy. The commander ordered her not to leave." "Ah, right, that's the problem," she said. "Well, how much could he do for the princess if he was allowed out?" "They were given the order because my lord was away, so they needed to keep an eye on the princess. That means being a sentry outside her room 24 hours a day." "Ah, her bracelet." Daphne began to cry. It was the only thing she had left of her mom. One of the guards said he was willing to find this bracelet for you. He would go and ask permission from the commander. Then the guard said, "Let's go together." But the other said, "Yes, you go." Upon returning, the guard said, "Your Highness, he has received permission from the commander. Let's go." "How pleased you are, Daphne," Monsieur knighted. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome, Your Highness, but don't take a step away from him." "Oh, but only your maids can't come with us. The commander has decided to let the princess go." Marielle said she understood and wasn't going with them. On the way, the guard said, "Don't be sad, princess. He will surely find your bracelet for you, which you call Jane." "Thank you," replied the princess. As they walked down the hallway, the princess noticed that there were no knights. She asked, "Where are all the knights, sir?" "Patrolling the neighborhood, Your Highness," the guard answered her. Daphne made up the bracelet story just to get out. "That's not what we need right now." She heard the healer from behind her quickly. A maid ran out of the room down the hallway, yelling for help. "Over here!" "What is it, sir?" asked Daphne. "Oh, princess," the knight answered her. "Forgive him, but he has to go away because this is internal Citadel business. He'll have to track down her priceless bracelet next time." "Ah, that's it. Maybe she can help with something?" asked the princess. The knight laughed and said, "No, princess. Don't worry. He will have your bracelet for you safe and sound. Please return to your chambers. Please excuse him." And off he went. I remembered that this is Eggman's room. Eggman Bertrand, a relative of Kale's who had been sick for a long, long time and was gravely ill. No one knew what he was sick with or how to treat it, so according to the plot he was supposed to die. Kale was thus left without support in the future. In desperation he would be forced to swear an oath to Alan and Flora. Daphne needs to save Eggman in order to help Kale. Walking to the door, she began to eavesdrop on what was being said. "How long, my lord? Unconscious?" the knight is already asking. "Have you sent for a healer?" The second knight replies, "Lady Selma will be here soon, don't worry." And then the knights heard Daphne's voice. She came to help, she said. The knight came over and said, "Princess, I told you to go back to your room." But she realized that the matter was serious and could not leave. "What's the matter with that uncle? What's wrong with him?" she asked. The second knight in charge said, "Princess, this is completely none of your concern. He has already summoned a healer immediately. Return to your chambers." Daphne said that if he's breathing heavily, nauseous or feverish, she knows how to treat it. "She'll help the healer select a cure, sir," Daphne said. "Medicine?" interjected the guard. "How does she know my Lord Eggman has such symptoms?" At last the lady doctor came in and asked what was wrong with my Lord Eggman. Daphne saw the woman and would interject to the healer. "Could she help you prescribe my lord's medicine, please?" "Let me help, Your Highness. We don't have time for that," the woman said. "You're not in the imperial palace. The emperor's authority means nothing here," the healer said. Please don't try to command in a situation like this. We don't have time for you right now." Then Daphne turned around and ran to her room. As she ran down the hall, she thought she had to convince Selma the doctor to cure Eggman. Daphne remembered that the Count had given her a chest of medicines and potions. Opening it, she asked, "Oh, what's this? So many medicines of all sorts, magic scrolls of some sort, powders? He cares for her so much, even though she's basically nobody to him. The commander really is her friend," Daphne thought. Daphne grabbed the box and went back inside. Walking over, entering the room, she said, "Here is the medicine that will cure my lord," and placed the whole box of medicine on the couch. Dauna held out her hands to the doctor with berries in them. The doctor asked what it was. "A poisonous oily berry." "Yes, it is indeed poisonous. But if you dry it, it only causes a slight upset stomach," Daphne said. The head knight said, "You say that? How can we believe it?" "It is used to cure diseases that are like my lord's in symptoms," said Daphne. "If she eats it, then can you believe her?" asked the princess. "An oily berry? Poisonous, it's true," Daphne said. "But in dried form it's used medicinally. She can eat this much and not get poisoned." She had half a berry in the palm of her hand. "But if you eat more," Daphne began to say as she was interrupted. "What kind of publicity game is this? What kind of blackmail if she's trying to prove to him that she's telling the truth? But what if she wants to poison my Lord Eggman, even at the cost of her own life?" thought the knight. Daphne said if you don't believe her, after you nurse him, she offers a poison test and asks if they agree. The doctor said, "As you wish, princess, but just don't disturb her now." The doctor finished the procedures for my lord. "Give me your berry here. You know, princess, if the test is positive, the Bertrand family will take it as a declaration of war on the part of the royal family," the doctor said. "All right," Daphne replied. "The important thing is that you've got the berries, and you're going to do something about it." Some time passed. The test showed it wasn't poisonous, otherwise the paper would have changed color. Besides, the princess ate some of the berry herself and she's fine, the doctor thought. "Then two proofs that the berry is not dangerous," said Daphne. "The doctor confirms that the berry is not poisonous," saying this to the knights. Aside from the chemical test, on the face of it, the princess's health after eating the berry. "She believes her, your highness," and took one berry. The result was literally in a few minutes. "My lord's shortness of breath has ceased, and he is no longer feverish," said the doctor. "And the heartbeat is normal. She's sure he'll come around soon," she added. The doctor said, "Your highness, I'm sorry she doubted her. Let's get acquainted. As befitting, her name is Selma. She is the Bertrand family healer," Daphne said. Daphne said she understood anyone who doubted the purity of the imperial family's intentions. "Nice to meet you, Selma," she said. "She's really glad my lord is better," she added. "My lord will wake up in a couple hours as promised. She will tell the recipe for the potion." "Your highness, how on earth do you know this recipe?" asked Selma. "When she lived in the orphanage, she was given this potion," Daphne replied. "So she learned that the berry had to be dried." One of them said, "Sir, aren't you going to say anything? Apologize to her highness at least." But the head knight said, "Can't you see she's already leaving?" The knight thought he never found Jane for her. It's her bracelet that her mom gave her. But the head knight said he wouldn't trust a girl like that if he were him. Doesn't he realize that she could be sent to them by an enemy family to make war with them later? Thought the knight. Sir, he doesn't think they'd go to such elaborate tricks. Whatever we asked, she didn't lie to us. Think what such a small child could know, said the knight. The next day. Princess, how are you feeling? Someone asked. It's all right, Daphne replied. Even though we're strangers to you, you still helped us. She thanked them for the medicine. So she promised to give you the recipe for the potion, Daphne said. If you refine it, you can organize its mass production for export. It would be a good profit, and raise the prestige of the House of Bertrand. That would be very good, Princess, said the Dr. Selma. It would help the Bertrands solve the food problem, she added. Then we must hurry to make this medicine, Daphne said. His lordship must learn of this as soon as possible. Mass production of a cure. Does the princess really want to help them? A little later. Your Highness, good news, said the butler and Kale. Your father-in-law is awake, my lord. Kale was very surprised and ran to his father's room. My lord Eggman, how are you feeling, my lord? He has lost consciousness. How many days has it been? My lord asked. It hasn't even been 24 hours this time, my lord, the butler replied. No wonder, he's feeling much better, he said. Kale ran into the room saying, Father, was he worried about me, son? the Edgeman asked. It was reported to him that you woke up. You came to so soon, father, Cale replied. The brat, why, did you want him to lie down for a couple more days? Said the Edgeman. Father, don't say that. How are you feeling? Asked Cale to him. He used to have a hard time even sitting down. Now it's so easy. Take care of yourself while you're not allowed to get up, Cale said. Son, how are you yourself? Fine now because you're awake, the father said. And he was really worried about him. Like he was going to die, really, Cale remarked. Afraid he's going to hell to his deceased wife? His father said. Now back to Daphne and Selma about the cure. After listening to your highness, she realized that all these ingredients could easily be found in the lands of Bertrand. She still can't understand how she missed such important knowledge, that the oily berry has strong healing properties. Winter is harsh here, Daphne said, and in the capital everyone knows about the healing properties of this berry. Almost everyone, she added. The butler came in and said, Lady Selma. She said, What's wrong? He has good news for you, the butler said. Daphne smiled and said, She knows why Selma is leaving. Lord Eggman is awake, isn't he? As you have realized, princess. Indeed you do, you are such a clever girl, said the butler. Daphne asked if she could go with them. All answered, of course. Come along, princess. Thank you very much. She's very anxious to see Lord Eggman conscious. Just in the room at Lord's, the son tells his father that the princess wishes to help them. Yes, she said she hates the imperial family with all her being, son Cale replied. Good. Since her intentions are no longer in doubt, he will ask to dispense with any misunderstandings. A knock at the door announced that, milord, it was Lady Selma, come in. May I come in? Replied. Come in. My lord turned around and saw the young lady. He interjected, Who is it, young lady, with you? That is our princess, they answered him. Yes, father, it is she, Cale confirmed. Daphne walked up to him and said, Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Daphne Blake. Her Highness brought that medicine that helped you. She told me the recipe. If it wasn't for Her Highness, I would have never known about such a powerful potion. Cale was very surprised that the princess had saved his father. Eggman said, Is that so? He doesn't know how to thank you, Your Highness, it was answered. Don't be discouraged, princess. He just woke up and can't do anything yet, said Milord Eggman Bertrand. He is Lord Eggman Bertrand. Pleased to meet you. I apologize that he wasn't here to greet you first. He hopes you are comfortable living in their home. If there is anything you are missing, please feel free to tell him. Daphne said, Thank you, milord, and smiled. Don't worry, father. He's taking good care of Mistress Daphne, Cale said. Mistress Daphne? Interjected the father, unable to think of an affectionate name for the princess for his son. But you call her Your Highness, too. That's the other son. She's your wife. You need to support her and show her we're family, Cale said. We all live together, so we need to pick a more affectionate nickname for the princess, he added. Like baby boa constrictor, for instance, one of them suggested. My lord, he says, and he likes baby, Cale reported. My lord, don't you think that's a bit rude? Said Selma the doctor. Yes, what's wrong? He asked. The princess is still a child after all. What else can you call her? Daphne got nervous and started to speak. Lady Selma, it's a nickname. You will forgive me, Your Highness, Selma said. Daphne ran up to Cale and said, Please tell him. Your Highness, he is very apologetic about what his father said. Little father is very stubborn. Though Daphne thought, Come on, I'll forget it. It's just a nickname. A few days later, dress fitting. Does the dress fit well? Asks the dressmaker. Do you like it, mistress? Asked Marielle. Yes, very much, and the size is perfect, replied Daphne. A knock is heard on the door. Your Highness, may I come in? Daphne answered, Yes. Two maids come into the room. One of them has a whole rack full of dresses, and the other has jewelry in a box. We have a gift for you, princess, Cale said. Your lordship, isn't that— Do you like it? Asked Cale. Ah, of course, but why did you suddenly decide to give it as a gift? There are only outfits, Daphne asked. I mean, they're only getting married the other day and already they're getting so many gifts, she added. We'll be traveling soon. He'll go. While you get dressed, princess, Cale said. Very well, your lordship, replied Daphne. Daphne walked over to the mirror and examined her dress. Here's your dress already fitted to your size, your dressmaker. It must fit so well, said Daphne. That's fine, replied Marielle. The tailor here is very skillful, she said. And who is he? The clothes he makes are superb, Daphne emphasized. She would like to know the man's name. We must go. The Archduke is waiting, Marielle said as she threw her cloak over the princess. Let's go, Daphne agreed. Before she left, she heard, Ah, you forgot something. You must be sure to wear your wedding ring on your way out, opening the box and showing the ring in it. But she won't wear it, Daphne said. She remembered that she and Cale had been so shy at the ceremony that she hadn't dared look at each other. Even eye to eye only took an hour of torture, and they could go. Will they ever be able to be together and love each other? When Daphne came outside, she asked, "Didn't keep you waiting long, your ladyship?" "Not at all, princess," said Cale. "I dare say your new dress suits you very well." They got into the carriage and drove off. There was a deep silence in the carriage, and Daphne thought, yes, there is still awkwardness between us. Should she begin the conversation? "Your lordship," she said, "I am very grateful for your gifts. All the dresses are of excellent quality." "He's very glad you liked it," Cale replied. "My lord, who is the tailor who makes such marvelous outfits?" "Sir Leon, your highness," replied Daphne. "Is that so?" she said. "Yes, they say he was a tailor before he went to knighthood." She couldn't believe that such a big, strong guy was doing such a savvy job. Daphne thought, what if we were to set up production? But why would a craftsman like him become a knight? Talent is wasted. He was born into a tailor's family, so he did learn a few things. The carriage stopped, and the princess saw a picturesque picture, an avenue of trees, with high mountains and snow in the background. It was very beautiful. "What do you think, your highness?" asked Cale. "Very beautiful," replied Daphne. "He loved this place very much, came here often. He's very glad you enjoyed it." Daphne said she would like to show this nature to all people. "If so, your ladyship, she has an idea. We just need to get permission from the landowner and—" as she was interrupted by a young man who appeared. He walked over and greeted the Duke and Princess. "His name is Rand Akmel. He's been waiting for you, your lordship. He has heard that you have recently married his lordship." "Yes, it is true," replied Daphne. "He begins to suspect that the Duke is not quite in his right mind." "How do you like being married to a girl from the royal family, huh?" Cale hesitated, and before he could say anything, Daphne beat him to it. "How do you talk to Archduke Bertrand?"